Welcome everybody to the Community Connection. Oh my gosh, Dr. Worster, we got Jim Knight on the
Stellar.
show. Man, this is stellar. What are we doing over here, man? This is like drop the mic episode. If no other episodes happen after this one, Jim, we're gonna be just fine. How you
Blah
doing,
blah
sir?
blah blah blah. It's great to be here. Thank you so much. I'm welcome. I'm grateful, and I'm already enjoying our conversation. So thanks for
Oh,
the invitation.
absolutely. As always, I got my good friend Dr. Worster,
Hey, Nathaniel. Great to see you, pal.
and we've got Megan on back on our show. Megan, what's going on? How you doing?
Hi guys, thanks for having me back. Super thrilled to be here tonight.
Awesome. You know, I kind of like lose track of hockey, Jim, after the Capitals get defeated. So I'm all interested in hockey until the
Mm.
Capitals lose. Are the playoffs still going on? I mean, has the Stanley Cup finished? Where are we in hockey right now?
So you're a fan of that Putin-loving hockey player
I
that's
am in I am a fan
Ooh.
of that Putin-loving hockey player.
I've
Yes,
seen
I
the
am.
pictures, he in arm in arm. Yeah, not my
You're
favorite
coming
player.
out swinging. You're coming
Not
out
my
hot.
favorite player. Yeah. But yeah, I have a little there's been some caps that I really liked. And I have to admit, he's got one really good play where he shoots the puck from the slot. It's pretty good. But no, you do know Florida just demolished Carolina and Edmonton. Looks like they're about to do that too. So we're gonna have a repeat of last year.
Oh
But
wow.
just tune in for the sixth or seventh game. Turn in about that, and you'll see what happens. We'll
So
get right back
Edmonton
to
is
where we
still
were.
in it. So Edmonton
Edmonton's
is
up
still in it.
3-1 on Dallas.
Oh wow. Now you are from Canada. Is that correct, Jim Knight?
I am a Canadian citizen from Canada, born in Canada. Prenatally was a hockey fan. Absolutely.
Prenatally.
That's how it
Toronto
works.
Maple Leafs fan. So I don't know what's worse, like the Dallas Cowboys or, but the Leafs are certainly one of the heartbreaking teams in sports for sure.
So you're from Toronto? Is that the area that you're from?
Grew up on a farm outside of Toronto, about 60 miles. I lived in Toronto for quite a while, went to the University of Toronto. I used to teach downtown at Ryerson University, and I would walk back to the subway, but Maple Leaf Gardens was right there, so I could buy a ticket for $5, and I watched the second half of many games in Maple Leaf Gardens. So I would
Wow.
teach about 8:30, and then I'd head up the street and then see if I could get a ticket. I even saw Canada Cup when Canada played Sweden. Gretzky was the leader of the team. So I saw some great teams playing
That's
in.
pretty awesome.
Nathaniel, do you know what hockey related is in Toronto?
Do I know what hockey related
What hockey related thing is in Toronto besides a stadium?
I mean, I don't know. Is that where like hockey was born? I don't know.
Nope. And Megan, do you want to take a guess?
Ice.
Okay, there is ice there. Jim, the answer is
Be the Hall of Fame,
Hockey Hall of
Hockey
Fame.
Hall
Oh,
of Fame.
which is
Yep,
worth a
it's good.
visit.
It's good.
It's a lot
It
of
is
fun.
worth. It
It's
is.
worth a visit.
When I was in Toronto, I visited. It's great.
Well, when you go there, I'm sure there'll be a monument to Ovechkin for breaking Gretzky's
Mm.
record.
If they let Russians in, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. They can't play in the Olympics. I know that. So.
You know, Edmonton is now that's where Wayne Gretzky, that was his first team, right? From what I understand, Edmonton.
Well, first NHL team, he played in the WHA. So he played for I forget the Indiana Road Racers or something. Anyway, he played in the WHA when he was about 17, and but the Oilers were his first NHL team. Peter Pocklington was the owner. He bought Gretzky.
That's pretty awesome. So love Gretzky, love him. I mean,
I
to
saw
me, he
him
is the
score
GOAT.
the. Saw him set up the greatest goal in the history of Canadian hockey. I would argue.
Wow.
1987 Canada Cup, Gretzky to Lemieux beating Russia in overtime. Russia in overtime, and the third game of the tournament to win the Canada Cup. A great goal. I was there
Yeah,
in Hamilton watching the game.
Wow.
that's pretty awesome. Well, I could
So you're
probably
going to
talk
try to do
about
this podcast in 45 minutes, but we've already spent 10
This
minutes.
is it's just gonna be hockey. The whole
it's
thing is
all
That's right.
related. It's all
That's really what
related.
I want to do with my life. If I could do playlists and hockey, that's really all I want to do.
Oh, we're going to talk about that too. But let's bring this around. Let's bring this universal conversation around.
Right?
Was Gretzky great because of Gretzky, or was Gretzky great because of his coaches, Jim?
Gretzky was. Here's the thing with Gretzky. If there was a pool where you could draft players in the NHL pool, you couldn't pick Gretzky because you'd automatically win.
Mm.
So he was by far. I mean, one year he won the scoring title on assist alone. which for the record, Ovechkin is a long way back when it comes to catching up.
There we go.
That's what he is.
Gretzky, when he got older, realized, I'm more helpful to my team to set up goals and to score goals. And so even though he scored 92 goals in a game or a season, more than Ovechkin ever did, as he got later, he started to pass the puck way more and set up goals. But Gretzky's coach probably was his dad. His dad is
Walter.
infamous for building a rink in the backyard. And in fact, I worked in near Brantford, where Gretzky's from, which is close to where I grew up. And I heard that he still has, like, he's gone now, but later in his life, he still had a rink. Kids would come over. And his dad taught him to look for things that nobody else could do. So what made Gretzky special was he would practice all kinds of things, but also, and he was undeniably gifted. I think he was playing with people 4 years above his age when he was in Toronto. But he transformed the game because the way he would be behind the net in the game, nobody had ever sort of exploited that opportunity. And I've watched him from behind the net in the playoffs once against Toronto, and it was like he had a force of energy back there, and you could see fear in the eyes of the players as they were watching him behind the net. So he changed the game, and I think his dad probably had a lot to do with teaching him how to think. And also, he was blessed with incredible perception abilities. So once I was watching them play Boston on TV, and there's like one goal difference, and there were about 30 seconds left in the game, and the clock stopped, and Gretzky's right in the thick of it, and then he goes to the referee and he points out that the clock had been off by 5 seconds, and so how he saw the clock in the midst of all that, but I don't know, he sees the world in a bigger way than the rest of us. So, but I do think probably if he was to talk about who had the biggest impact on his life, it'd probably be his father, Walter Gretzky.
Well,
Outstanding.
let's get him on next.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
If you can connect us with him, we'd appreciate that.
He's around more and more. So, yeah.
All right.
Awesome. Megan?
All right, Jim, I'm going to kick us off with more transitioning us to some coaching now.
Great.
All right. So starting with what I think is probably one of your more favorite startups. On a scale of 1 to 10, how is the field of instructional coaching going?
Oh man, that's hard to say. I think there's good and bad. So I don't know if I can give it a number, but I would say that artificial intelligence presents a lot of opportunities. So hypothetically, it could be a really high score because you could scale up and do more with AI. But at the same time, there's this sort of narrative that AI can replace coaches, and I think that, and maybe someday they can, but at this point, it's years off because this idea that you can just go to the machine and it'll tell you what to do and that's going to solve your problem. Most effective coaching is adaptive, not technical. It's not a technocratic solution. It's not like a fix-it solution. It's we get in there, we try something out, we invent stuff, we experiment, we mess around, and AI is just not capable of doing that. And then AI also, just because it identifies questions doesn't mean that's necessarily the right thing. It might identify questions because it's good to identify questions, which it is. So I think, the AI could have us scale coaching in the best way possible. It could lead to much more impact. We're doing courses now on AI and coaching, but the narrative around it is a little scary because I think it's really important that the people who talk about AI and coaching actually understand coaching and they don't just understand AI. The technologists can tell us how to use these tools, but it still needs to be leading to unmistakably positive impact on kids' lives. And hence, you probably need a coaching cycle to make it happen. I might be a little biased, but I honestly don't think I don't really believe in quick fixes. I think you have to experiment. Classroom is just too complex to say, oh, I went to AI, it said do this thing. Plus, there's always the dangers of bias built into it. There's a wonderful book called Supremacy about AI where they really lay out really clearly how the bias in play. I mean, unfortunately, the large language models that they're using to create AI reflect our society, and our society is racist and it's gender biased as well. So you have to be really careful, and you need a coach to mediate the whole process. It's powerful, but it's not going to replace coaching. And I think if we try to make it replace coaching, it's not going to work. It's not going to have much impact. So maybe 8 or 9, maybe 2 or 3, somewhere in between.
There you go. That's a good answer.
Hey, Jim, I want to follow up on something you just said because you've written it You wrote that quick fixes are not real fixes.
Right.
I think we all agree. But we are all in an industry that can demand a quick fix. So how do we get those who are holding others accountable? How do we get them to slow down and accept that real change may take more time than they would like?
Oh, I'd say measure impact. You talk to Sharon Thomas, who was the lead author on the book
Mhm.
about instructional coaching. You need to be able to draw a direct line between what the coach does and the impact on kids. If there's no change in kids, your coaching didn't work. So if you measure impact on kids, instead of measuring, did the teacher try a strategy 2 or 3 times, measure, was there a change in achievement or engagement? You can spell out that more clearly on exactly what those things mean. But you need powerful goals that have an unmistakably positive impact on kids' lives. And you need to be able to show that the coach's effort in partnership with the teacher made it happen. And I just don't think in most cases the quick fix is going to change much. What you might see for a quick fix, it's often people who are selling teaching strategies is, oh, we'll come in and we'll teach you how to tell the teacher how to use the strategy. And the teacher will try it for a few times, but there's no real change in the kids. And then ultimately they go back to the old way they used to teach. But when you start with kids and you measure the impact on kids, that's the way you can see. And I think you should, I mean, if coaching isn't changing what's happening for kids in positive ways, it's not working. It's a bad use of resources. It should, that to me is the way you, that's the way you measure your impact is
Mm.
what kind of impact are we having?
Jim, I I have never surfed in my life, but Eric, I think it was last year or maybe 2 years ago. I went to Brazil with my wife, and I was damn determined to learn how to surf. This is a bucket list thing. I grew up in Tennessee, probably like Toronto, not a lot of opportunities to surf. And so I go to this beach, this beautiful beach, and I get this surfing coach named Igor. And let me tell you something about this little guy. Fantastic. He was exceedingly knowledgeable about the craft. He was an even though he didn't speak English, English wasn't his first language, he was a terrific communicator. He made me feel safe. He made me feel like comfortable, kind of like that Amy Edmondson, like that psychological safety,
Right.
like I really felt safe to try and fail, right? He was patient with me, and we set goals and like little small goals. And after the lesson, I think I was able to surf a whopping 10 seconds. And I just felt
Hmm.
like I was ready to, like go to Hawaii and enter one of these contests. And I thought to myself, I wish all of our coaches could be like Igor, like just having that kind of natural skill set. So I got a couple of questions I want to kind of fit into this. For you, Jim Knight, what are the absolute non-negotiable traits a coach has to have in order for teachers to maximize their impact?
Oh, non-negotiable, I think probably wouldn't be a word we would use, but we would
Hmm,
we would say they're a must-haves. Slight semantically different, but
sure.
we would say there are 7 things that must be in place for a coach to flourish. 3 of them have to be with who you are. So your set of beliefs, your way of being. You could call it the vibe.
Mm,
What's the vibe I feel with this person? Do I feel like we're partners or do I feel like they're talking down to me? That's the way of being. Skills, the way you ask questions and listen, and then your leadership skills, how the coach manages his life or her life, and then how they interact with other people to be multipliers, not diminishers, to balance ambition with humility. I'd say those 3 are things that are essential in terms of who you are, my beliefs, my skills, my leadership. The
mm,
third thing, what you do, is you probably need some kind of coaching cycle, some kind of process to move through. We spent 10 years messing around with the impact cycle and landed on the impact cycle, but I'm sure there's other approaches. But you need some kind of conversational framework to move through. You can't just get together and talk. Like, we have to set a goal. We have to move through. It sounds like your guy in
mm,
Brazil was helping you with that. The second thing is you need to know how to manage data, gather data. So in other words, data helps you see where you are, helps you set goals, helps you monitor progress. And if you're not really skilled at gathering data, you're not going to see everything that happens in the classroom. You're not going to be able to set goals, not going to be able to monitor. That's why I wrote the book Data Rules.
mm,
And then the third thing is once you set the goal, kind of your ideal, what you're striving for, you need to be able to get there. And so you need teaching practices. So we talk about an instructional playbook, but whatever it is, you don't want the coach to say, well, I got nothing. You want to be able to help the teacher hit the goal. So those three things, a process to move through, to make the process work, you need data, and then the data helps you figure out where you are, where your goals are, monitor progress, and then you need strategies to take you there. That's how the impact cycle works. And then the seventh part is you work in a system that supports you. If a coach doesn't have time to coach, not much is going to happen. So you
Mhm.
need widespread understanding of what coaching is and understanding of the philosophy behind it. And ultimately, we really believe leaders need to be coaches. To me, leadership, one of the, if not the most important leadership skill, but certainly one of the most important skills for leaders is to be able to help people understand how to how to get better, how to improve. Just telling people what to do usually doesn't have a really big impact. But if leaders start to understand a coaching approach to leading, make a big difference. But so I would say those seven things: who I am, where I work, and what I do. Those three things would be, and you can put it in a little Venn diagram. So this
I like it.
sides who I am, this sides what I do, this side, and all around that is where I work.
Are those skills inherent or are they learned? I mean, like Megan, and I'm sure you were a phenomenal coach. I mean, like, were you just like born with these things or like, are these all trainable?
Well, I think like, oh, go ahead, Megan.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think there's definitely skills, right? And skills can be taught. I do think, to Jim's point, that there is a way of being, to some extent, that we screen for when we're looking for coaches. And we have strategic questions that we pose that are really gauging. Some of those are just like adaptability. We want to know, like, is this someone would want to ask for help from? Are they approachable? Do they want what's best? Is it about them or is it about the teachers and students? One of our favorite questions is, what do you do when someone resists your ideas at work? Which might have come from you, Jim. And it's a temperament question that
Mm,
we're asking.
awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Jim, you mentioned the instructional playbook.
Right.
In one of your books, you said that you got the idea for it. You were on a flight to Chicago with a software trainer. Is that the genesis of how you got that idea?
Yeah, she worked for Microsoft and she helped people learn how to use software. I didn't know it was Chicago. I forgot that, but I was
That's
flying
your
some.
book. But I was fascinated. I think we all need to be better listeners. And it seems, talking to Megan, that the instructional playbook is a big part of what you sponsor and endorse. And to think that that happened because you were willing to have a conversation with somebody. Now, when I get on a flight, I put in my earbuds and I don't talk to anybody.
Really?
Yes, or that's a lot of real life too. But I just appreciate, Jim, that you were so open to having that conversation, and that conversation would shift your work.
Yeah, I asked her, well, what do you do when you leave? How do you make sure that they can do what you teach them? And she said, we create playbooks. And a bell went off in my head. I went, oh, that was about 2013. So I said, well, we should be creating playbooks. And right after that, we started talking about it. I think in the impact cycle was maybe the first place I wrote about it, but I presented it in 2015. But the thing is that there's that Robert Sutton talks about the trouble is people think talking about something is the same as actually doing it, and
Mm,
you have to create. First off, the coaches need a depth of knowledge to be able to make it happen, and then the second part is the coach needs to clearly communicate it, or it's not going to happen. If you don't communicate it, it's not going to happen. So the playbook serves both those purposes. In creating it, the coaches will have a depth of knowledge, and then once they've created it, they've got tools they can use to communicate, and that's why um, the development of checklists and one pagers and all those things have kind of taken off. There's quite a few books now on one pagers, lots of books about playbooks. So I
Yes.
think people recognize translating it into practice is a really important thing.
so here's my question. Was this conversation in first class or was it in economy class?
Can't remember.
I tell you why, because nobody talks in economy class, but when you're in first class,
This guy.
everybody talks. Everybody wants to know why you're in first class. So like, and I learned more. Some of the best PD I've ever had like this is sitting in first class because people love to talk about why they're in first class. You know what I mean? So that's it. Yeah. Hmm.
I'll be looking for you up there, Nathan.
There you go. We'll
I,
we'll
I
we'll,
want
we'll
to.
chat. We'll chat.
Our
Definitely if we have to
policy
go out
is
of
if
Chicago.
you sit in first class, you have to use your points to get there. That's how it works at ICG. So
It's true.
Megan, I think you wanted to ask about the new book a little bit.
I sure do. So we'd love to just quickly ask you about the IC toolkit.
I like the
And
way you guys are holding up all these books one by one. This is
all
great.
right.
Uh-huh.
I don't have
Okay.
any
Well,
books, Jim.
Actually,
okay. Well, you have lots of books, just not.
Yes.
not this one.
Okay. So, one of the things that I appreciate is that just the description of this is to enhance the art and craft of coaching. So first, I just want to acknowledge that I truly appreciate that. So you want to talk about kind of pushing back on AI, that coaching is an art, it's a science, but it's a craft. There's a humanistic component to it, that AI as it is right now could not replace. Um, so tell me a little bit about the origins of this tool and how you see it supporting coaches.
Well, first off, I've been writing columns for something like 25 years. So I've got these articles and columns that have been around since around 2003. I think I wrote the first, it's in that book, the first article on instructional coaching for Learning Forward. And there were like orphans out there, they didn't really have a home. And I kept thinking, I'd like to put all these things together into one place so people can find them. And then the second part is I kept meeting people and it just seemed like they were getting together. There wasn't any kind of professional learning that they were doing for coaches. They get together and talk about things, but it wasn't really intentional about improving the skills and the craft of coaching. And so what we did, our team, Michelle and Amy and Jessica, is we tried to put together sort of 36 weeks of professional development stuff. So then when you get together, you have something you look at. It could be an article about students on the fringes and the importance of emotional engagement. It could be about the power of autonomy. It could be a checklist about how to practice and an activity you can do to practice the way you ask questions or listen. It could be a list of questions. So there's a whole host of things, protocols for teams getting together. There's a little sort of book study for every article that's included. And the idea would be that at the start of the year, every coach would get a copy of this, and then you use this to guide your discussions when you get together. And, it might only be a 700 word column, but it can lead to pretty fruitful, something about humility, or there's a one on coach splaining, these kind of
Mhm.
things lead to pretty meaningful conversations. That's our hope, is to help coaches move forward by having this tool book they can go to.
That's great. And I love how you've kind of even honored the partnership principles within the setup of the book itself. There's choice, there's agency in there, there's an opportunity to work either collaboratively or independently.
Megan, is that
I'm,
is that the 7 partnership principles?
that is correct, Eric. Yes.
7 success factors, 7 partnership principles. The book's actually organized around the 7 success factors. So the
Yes,
first
it
one
is.
is on the partnership principle, but you're right.
Yes.
It's intentionally meant to honor the professionalism of teachers. We would say in many ways, one of our main messages is if we want the schools our kids deserve, we have to treat teachers as professionals. We can't treat them as unskilled laborers, like we're teaching them how to like learn nothing but skills to do their job. We have to recognize them as professionals. We have to involve them in their learning. And so that's just one small way, but I just don't think if we have people who are just reading from scripts and
Mhm.
there's a place for scripts at times. I mean, I used them when I was first learning how to teach, but I think I think we really want our schools to be places where kids can flourish. We really need to recognize they need to be taught by professionals, and they won't be professionals unless we treat them like professionals.
True.
So, Jim, speaking of scripts, I know that you have. I've been trained a little bit in some sim training. You
Mm,
have some background in that.
I do.
Do you want to share a little bit about that background?
Well, when I was a teacher, I worked in a community college. I thought I was going to teach Shakespeare, but I ended up working with young adults and adults with learning disabilities. Had no idea what to do, and there was a person there who is an expert in strategic instruction model from SIM, not SIN, but SIM,
Mhm.
Hmm.
University of Kansas. This was in Toronto, in the city of Toronto at Humber College, and Dee LaFrance was her name, and she was my coach. And so I had no clue what to do, and the kids' writing was just challenging. They were literally the coordinator said to me, if you can do anything with these students, have any impact, I'll consider this course a great success
Mm.
because they're the 10 worst kids in the whole system. So Dee taught me about the sentence writing strategies from the University of Kansas, and I use them. They're very direct instruction, very step by step, but they break down writing into some simple components, and then they scaffold the learning process. And there's a very Madeline Hunter type teaching where you explain things and you keep kids engaged, then you model it, then there's a verbal rehearsal, then there's a controlled practice, there's a grade appropriate practice and generalization. And it worked like a charm. And the kids wrote a letter to the president to save the course. And I got a full-time job and I got an award for the course, but really Dee should have got the award. And then I went to Kansas. I became a sim professional developer. And I went back to Toronto. I started to do workshops on these writing strategies mostly. And I was in the doctoral program in the English department at the University of Toronto at the time. I thought I was going to be an English professor. That's where I thought I was going. And I loved writing. And I did all these workshops. I had zero impact, nothing. I
Mm.
handed out postcards. I said, when you use this strategy, it's going to blow you away how powerful it is. You're going to work with kids who've never succeeded and you're going to see great things. Everybody was like nodding their head, yes, sounds great. Nobody did a darn thing. So I work with Michael Fullen at the University of Toronto, who's a world leading expert on educational change. And he was writing a book called Change Forces. I read everything that he'd done up to that point. And he has also introduced me to people like Peter Block and Margaret Wheatley and these other great thinkers. And then I decided I want to do my doctorate on why won't people implement. And
Mm.
first thing was a learning consultants. And we didn't like the hierarchical sound of that. So then we moved to instructional collaborator. And then we kept hearing people say, your people they're kind of like coaches. We're reading coaches. It sounds the same thing we do. So we shifted the name to instructional coach. And I still remember the first day I heard someone who wasn't on our team say, I'm an instructional coach. I was like,
Mm.
that's our word. I can't believe that. Now there's like 100,000 people on LinkedIn who are instructional coaches. But it all started with those strategies. How do we get those into the hands of teachers? How do we get high quality implementation? Because great ideas that don't get implemented doesn't make much of a difference.
Well, I am loving that origin story, Jim. Speaking of people when they are starting out at something, so we have a lot of people a lot of our teachers are in schools who haven't gone through the traditional teacher pathway of going to school for teaching, and now we have a lot of people who didn't take that way to become teachers. Given that shift in a lot of our schools having many brand new or people who didn't go the traditional route, um, what what role does coaching play with those brand new teachers who didn't have all that background in pedagogy and training?
Oh, it's vital. I mean, I've been in so many new teachers' classrooms that have, for example, classroom management rules on the wall that have never been referenced after they were posted. Teachers go to a week on classroom management, they create their expectations, they post them in the room, they never look at them again. You can have like a pedagogical framework or a set of teaching practices, or this is the way we do things. And I think that's actually a good thing that this is kind of our focus and everybody knows to look at those things. But to take those ideas and translate them into practice, you probably need a coach who helps you do it because they help you set a goal, they help you learn the strategy, they maybe model it for you, they can show you other people doing it, then they help you make adaptations and they keep you focused on the goal. The goal becomes the standard of excellence. And so I think if you really want people to do the practice, you need highly skilled coaches who understand those 7 success factors because just just telling people what to do in a workshop or whatever it's going to have it's probably less than it's probably less than zero in terms of positive because they look at their charts and think I should be doing something but I don't know what to do and I'm overwhelmed
Yep.
and coaches in very many ways because they help people identify goals and see pathways and then build success they
Mm.
bring hope so that we're going to keep some of those teachers in the system because the teachers they see a pathway to help them achieve their goals and they get clear on what the goals could be.
Yeah. I think I saw, Eric, some statistic that said like quality coaching can help bridge that divide between like an experienced teacher and a new new teacher, almost like
Hmm.
5 years or something.
Hmm.
It's something substantial. If it's the right coach, obviously, if it's the
Right.
right culture. So that a culture of coaching, it's totally clear what that means. Going back on Dr. Worsh's question, Jim, I'm exceedingly curious to pick your brain on something. Um, and so if you can bear with me, it's kind of like a scaffolded couple tiered question. The first one is a culture of coaching.
Right.
I've been in schools, Jim, where we would have a coach and there would be like, the coach is just a spy for the principal and they're like a curriculum cop. And you don't want to
Right.
work with that coach unless you're brand new or broken. And I'm a 5 year experienced teacher. I sure as hell don't want this coach to be in my room because then everyone making is going to think that I'm broken. How do you like, so the first tier is how do you like recraft that culture of expectations where like, listen, if we're a professional, we all get coaching. Like I don't know any
Right.
professional that doesn't have a coach. How do we change that mindset?
So I want to finish Dr. Worcester's
Sure.
question first, and then I want to come back to that question, if that's okay, because I think
Yep.
there's something really important that I
Yeah.
need to say, which is when we talk about the approach of a coach, we break it down into what's called facilitative coaching, dialogical coaching, and then we talk about telling, which we don't consider to be coaching.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And and if you think of a table, there's like two columns. One column is choice, and one column is sharing. Are you with me so far?
Yep.
So in the facilitative approach, the coach, the teacher has choice. So the facilitative coach is not telling the teacher what to do, but they're not sharing. They set their expertise aside because it would just get in the way.
Hmm.
This person knows
Right.
what they need to do. I have to help them make a plan. I have to get them organized.
Yep.
The second approach, the dialogical approach, and also the facilitative approach where you set aside your expertise, they don't need my expertise because they already know what to do.
Right.
Just get in the way. My wife is an Ironman. She did the Ironman a few years ago.
Impressive.
And she, you swim 2.6 miles, you bike 116 miles, then you run a marathon. Her little line was, I do marathons, but only as a part of a thing. Anyway, a while back, she was talking about she needs to get back into running. So I started to give her advice. And
Sure.
she looked at me and she goes, I did do an Ironman. Like I know a thing or two about running. So my expertise on running, and if you just saw me below the bottle, you'd see this guy's not really an expert. Wasn't helpful. It just got in the way. And some we love to give advice, but often it gets in the way. So the facilitative
Hmm.
approach is you set your expertise aside. The dialogical approach is this teacher doesn't know what to do. They don't have the expertise.
Yep.
So now I share ideas, but the teacher still makes a choice. Because the reality is people only do what they choose to do anyway. So let's just acknowledge that up front. And so what instructional coaches learn is they learn how do I share ideas in ways that don't shut down the thinking of the other person, that open them up to the conversation. And so they say, well, look, other teachers I've worked with have tried a few of these things. Do any of these things sound like what you want? And as you're describing your situation, I heard a few different things that might be goals. What do you think? Which one sounds like the one you want? So the teacher's a partner in the conversation. They're not being told what to do, but at the same time, they're learning ideas they can use. They're learning ideas in a way that means they're going to do it. Because if you go to telling and saying, this is what I did, this is what you need to do, they don't have the same kind of ownership. And there's a good chance they'll nod their head yes and do nothing.
Yep.
That's not to say telling isn't important. There are times
Mm.
you have to do telling. If the principal says you're coming to school too close to the start of class, you need to get in class. Duty day starts at this time. You're coming in late every day. You have to show up on time. The principal's not going to be okay with the teacher said, I don't want to do that. And it's like parenting. If you say you got to go clean your room, you don't want your daughter to say, no, I don't think so.
Right.
Go do it. And there are things that are telling situations. But when it comes to sharing knowledge, and also when you engage the partner in the process, then they're growing and thinking and they're expanding their capacity and they're owning it in a way that doesn't happen when you just say, here's what you need to do. I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm going to, and when you set the goal that they want to hit, then you're off to the races. So I would say when you're working with new teachers,
Hmm.
the thing to do is you still engage in a dialogical approach, but there's way more scaffolding, lots more of suggestions around what the goal could be, a lot more suggestions around what the teaching strategies would be. And the coach has to have expertise about data and about strategies. They just don't act like an expert. They act like a partner.
Sure.
So it's kind of the difference between partnering and parenting. And too often people think the way to get people to learn things is by taking the parenting approach. I'm going to tell you what to do. And we just, that's how we started, actually. We just found it didn't work. You have to start.
Hmm.
That's the answer to that question. Now, in terms of your question about culture,
Sure.
the first thing I would say is, in my experience, to shape a culture, it's really important to zone on a few simple things, ideally developed collectively. But there's a few simple values that drive what we want to do. One of those values might be we honor the person, not in the room. These are some of our values for our little
Mm,
organization. One of our values is we keep kids first. That has really specific things in terms of what we do but every decision we make is filtered through this idea of what's best for kids. One of our ideas is we are learners. And so that means we're willing to take risks, we're willing to confront reality and move forward. So the first thing I'd say about culture is for there to be a few simple things articulated and gone back to over and over and over again. And every time you see it, you call attention to it, you praise the person. When you see somebody violating the values, you have a one-to-one conversation and say, look, our goal here is, we honor the good in other people. We look for the good. Yeah, or we honor the person not in the room. What I heard you doing was this. That's not the way it works at this school. But the
mhm,
second part is, I think, to create that culture where people recognize the power of coaching is to start with the influential people in the school, those informal leaders in the school. You can say, you know, if Megan does it, that whole department's going to do it. And so
mhm,
you go to those people and you start with them. You start with the stars. So people are like, how come you're working with them and you're not working with me? If you start with the first and second year teachers, what happens is people say, well, I don't need a coach. I've been teaching for a long time. I don't need it. So I go to the people who are the stars to do just what you said, to communicate that idea that everybody can benefit from coaching. It's a powerful thing. And actually, I think it's also important to recognize that coaching isn't going to solve every situation. There are some things
mhm,
we're dealing with that are not coaching issues, they're personal issues, or there's things that are
mhm.
going on that are not about the way you approach teaching in the classroom. And then it might be a mentoring kind of role from somebody, or it could be some kind of counseling. There could be all kinds
Sure.
of things that aren't just coaching. But to me, start with the stars. That doesn't mean you only work with the leaders, but it should be very clear that the people that everybody, you get that reading teacher that actually
Mm,
taught my daughter, and I respect her so much, and she's working with a coach and she's talking about how helpful coaching was. That's how you get it going. And then the other thing is, make sure your coaching's effective, because people will
Hmm.
only do it if it's worth it and they can do it. So your coaching has to add value, to use a
mhm.
sort of businessy phrase. It has to make a difference for people. But once teachers can see this is going to save me time, it's going to help me reach more kids, I'm in.
Yeah,
And not only that, but this coach makes me feel good because he sees my strengths or she sees my strengths and she encourages me. It's so good on so many levels. If the coaching is a waste of time, teachers are right to resist a lot of the things they resist.
of
There's
course.
so
Yeah,
much to
I
do.
agree.
So I think, but when it works, it should catch on pretty quickly.
I love it. Going to Dr. Worster's question about, and look, it is what it is. The makeup in our schools, are different than they were 15, 20 years ago. Long-term subs, first year teachers, provisional contracts, all those things. And a coach could have their hands full working with the individuals in that school. It's very possible. Jim, I have been, and Megan and I were talking a little bit before you hopped on. I am dying to know what your philosophy is or thoughts are on having a culture of team-based, team-centric coaching alongside with individual coaching. You look at John Hattie's research, yet, you know, teacher efficacy is exceedingly high. Collective teacher efficacy is higher. I'm curious what your thoughts are on having that dual capacity role of being able to serve the individual needs of teachers, but also serve teams.
Well, that word collective efficacy gets used a lot.
Sure does.
IFX,
Sure does.
I forget the person who did the dissertation, but it's based on one dissertation someone did.
Wow.
But what it means
That's a lot
is,
of talk for one dissertation.
yeah, but what it means is a group of people collectively believe we can do this.
Hmm.
You know, I used to be a hockey coach, and one of the things I really tried to do was to unify the team. I did that sometimes in kind of nasty ways. Let's beat those rich kids from Kansas City, we'd say. But I wanted the whole team to come together. And we would never say anything negative about each other. We encouraged each other. We built each other up. There were things to work on. We gathered data on every kid, but that was collective efficacy. Every kid believed they can do it.
Hmm.
So to me, collective efficacy, I think it's important. And maybe I haven't got this right, but it's not just bringing people together to talk.
Sure.
It's that you have a community of people that all believe we can do this together. Part of that probably is a shared sense of purpose, which is really, really important that we all here for the kids. So it's not just about coming together. However, there are a lot of things that can make that happen. But probably the greatest thing that's going to be, you have to have individual efficacy to have collective efficacy.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing I would say. But the second thing is this. The critical thing is that people care about the goal they're striving for. I'm going to talk to Richard Boyatzis tomorrow as an expert on change. He would say to you, telling people what the goal is almost guarantees it's not going to happen. I shouldn't put
Mm.
words in his mouth. He may not say that, but in his research, he makes it pretty clear that unless you care about the goal, it's not going to happen. And so if that team comes together and there is a shared goal that they all really truly care about, they say, I really want to hit this goal. I'm emotionally committed to the goal. Then, and they hit the goal, that's an extremely powerful and good thing. It's kind of like when a bunch of kids put on a play, and the night after the night the play is finished, and they're all done, and they have this celebration, because they really succeeded, and then you'll remember kids from that play years later because of what you did together in that moment. That can happen with teams, but too often what happens is they come together and they don't give a rip about the goal, and they're just
Mm.
doing it because somebody else said it, and they're going along and it wastes time. So I think the way I haven't studied this, but the more I think about this, the way I think it would work is that if you have some kind of hybrid where the coach works with each teacher individually, helps them set a list of goals based on a clear picture of reality. Maybe they watch video or there's a whole host of things, what we call the close watch or interviewing kids or any number of things. But they each say, well, here are 3 or 4 things I'd like to do. Then you bring the group together and say, it looks like these are 3 or 4 things you all would like to do. Which is the one you most want to do? And everybody is committed to the goal. I think
Mm.
they're off to the races. But if it's just more of the same, just coming together and that's what they want to do, I'll go along. That's not really my thing, but I like my people. Then I don't have a lot. Even when you have an emotionally compelling goal, it's hard. But if you don't
Mm.
care about the goal, I just don't think much change is going to happen. And worst case scenario, people find it a waste of time and it's not good.
Right now.
Okay. So, one of the kind of cornerstones of the impact cycle is video reflection, with kind of the belief that people don't always know what it is that what they look like or how they're performing when they're actually doing it. How has your usage of video kind of evolved over time? And do you think video reflection is always required to have impactful coaching?
Okay, so it all started with the World Cup.
Hmm.
I was watching the World Cup of soccer, and England was playing. Mick Jagger was in the stands, and we knew about the power of video. My colleague, Dr. Mike Hoke, he'd studied he'd studied video and he'd seen the power of it. But you had to bring these big machines in. Some kid had to show you how to use it, and then you had to watch it in the staff lounge because you had to take
Mm.
the tape out and plug it in, and it was just such a hassle. And even though it was helpful, it was so hard. And so anyway, during the World Cup, I saw Mick Jagger in the stands, and he had this little camera. It was a flip camera,
Mhm.
and turned out he was paid to hold onto the camera. I didn't
Of
realize, but it
course.
worked because I bought flip cameras for all the coaches in our study. We had a study funded by IES, I think. And so all the coaches got video and they started to use video. And then we learned a lot along the way. the very first time we used it, I said, just take your camera out, video record each other, watch the video. And one of the persons was watching the video. She burst into tears.
Hmm.
And she said, oh, I hate looking at myself on video. I knew this was going to be complicated, not as easy as I thought. And then we learned, in our experience, it's better to not watch the video with the person.
Sure.
You watch it, and we learned that giving person a tool, an interpretive tool to look at their video, then getting together to talk about it. Then we developed a set of questions and so forth. And I would say video is super powerful. There's a person I just interviewed on our podcast a couple, maybe 6 weeks ago, and she did her doctorate on the impact cycle, and she said, when teachers watch themselves on video, it was night and day different. The
Absolutely.
impact of the coaching when they looked at it or not. But we wouldn't force it because we think it's emotionally complex, and there are all kinds of reasons why people may. I mean, it's probably easier now because of people are used to watching themselves on Zoom.
Sure.
But still, we wouldn't force it. And there are a lot of other things you can do. There's a thing called the close watch, where just to give you one of, there's like 5 or 6 different things. But for the close watch, the coach teaches a lesson, and the teacher takes time and looks at each student. And she says, I wonder what that kid's feeling right now. And I wonder what that kid needs. And how do I feel about that student? And where do my feelings come from? They might even draw the student just to spend some close watch with each student. And while they ignore the coach, essentially, and they just look at each student and they think about them, because, when you teach, you're so busy, there's so many things to juggle, and you don't really have time to spend 5 minutes thinking about each student. And it may not be 5 minutes, depending on how big the class is. But the close watch is an alternative to video. It gives you a different perspective. Interviewing kids is an alternative to doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Having a classroom discussion about the class can be helpful. So there's lots of different ways of doing it, but I would say most people, for a variety of reasons, defense mechanisms, perceptual errors, our quest for certainty, the impulse for certainty, all those things make it so that we don't really see reality clearly. And when people look at it on video, they're often, sometimes they're delighted. I had one teacher who, when she looked at the video, said, I couldn't believe how well those kids talked to each other in the group.
Yeah, right.
Great to see. But sometimes you'll look at it, and there's also just the physical parts, like Michelle Harris. When she watched once, she was a consultant for us for many years. She said, we turned on the video. She was a part of the group that we did when we first started to use video. We showed the video of her coaching, and she said, her quick answer was, I'm never wearing those purple pants again. So, the stuff like that can happen.
Yep.
But I wouldn't force it, because I think if you force it, there's going to be so much cognitive dissonance. It's not going to be helpful.
Yeah.
So look at other ways of getting a clear picture. But
Jim, I agree so much.
Really is key. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
agree so much. I was in real quick story. I was in Eric, you'll like this one, high school, with my work as a consultant, and the principal said, "Hey, why don't you come in and watch this calculus class? I'd love the teacher wants feedback." Like, you might as well bring that pet chinchilla in there with a clipboard and give feedback. I don't know anything about this, right? And like, I agree. I don't think we watch game film enough. I think that we need to be able to get into a safe
Yes.
place, to be able to
Yes.
watch game film, have a checklist, the same questions that I would ask, you could answer of yourself. You watch it, come back to me, tell me what you saw, and then like we'll give you feedback on that. So I really appreciate you sharing that story. Megan, Eric said there was one more substantive question. I disagree. I think this is the most substantive question that we can ask, because Megan said that you have killer playlists. And so Megan's going to take us out and ask a question about music. Man.
All right. So I feel like, there's some kindred spirit. I certainly believe in the power of music to set the tone, to have that kind of emotional connection even before you get started. I heard one time you had the Cocteau Twins playing, and I was like, oh, Cocteau Twins, and it was, and you mentioned it, so it was that was a deep dive. Cockatoo
Cocteau Twins.
Oh,
Twins.
Cocteau.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. So anyway, tell us what's like your top 5 playlists, either to get learning started, or what you're listening to on the drive that you had today on your way back to Nebraska.
Great question.
Okay, so my friend Michael Bungay Stanier, who wrote The Coaching Habit, the most popular coaching book of this
Hmm.
millennium.
Oh yeah, what's on your mind question. Yeah, yeah, last time.
He's a big music fan. He's a big Bob Dylan fan.
Yeah.
So so when I drove up, I sent him a podcast, or he sent me a playlist of some famous person of Dylan covers, and I wrote back. I said I can do better than that. So I sent him my Dylan cover. So I listened to that, and then I was listening to like hardcore real country, like Bobby Bear, Buck Owens, George Jones. I had like a real country playlist. So that was the other one today. That's what that was getting me through. That's what got me up. I listened to audiobook most of the way, and then I'm like, okay, it's time for music. So the Dylan one got me there. And there's quite a few cool things like the Black Keys doing a song and White Stripes, but then also some pretty acoustic stuff. So it was kind of a nice little mix. It was great.
It's pretty
White Stripes,
outstanding.
Awesome.
what do they do? They do
Seven Nation Army.
Yeah.
yeah, well, no, I'm thinking of the Dylan song they do. Oh yeah, one more cup of coffee for the road. And then
Oh, yeah.
the Black Key. I think those two bands are like I think the Black Keys ripped off the White Stripes because it's very similar. Guitars and drums, right?
Well, I just think they need at least a third person. They need a
Right.
trio, like come on.
I would have loved to have seen the White Stripes. It would have been great. My daughter saw them, but I never got to
Hmm.
see them. At any rate, that's what I was listening to.
All right. So if you were going to create maybe a 5-song playlist for a bunch of novice coaches coming into one of your sessions, and there were 5 songs, what would those 5 songs be?
Oh gosh, you should have given me some preparation. Okay,
Nope, it's right off the top.
well, what's her name? You Can Do Hard Things. That would be one.
Okay.
Uh, I forget the singer. We organized a concert for her once,
Hmm.
but I can't remember her name. But that's a beautiful song. Alicia Keys.
Mm,
Um, You're Doing a Good Job, which I believe that song was written about. I think that was written about teachers. She
mm,
talked about everybody during COVID, but it's mostly teachers. It's such a beautiful song. I think it's a moving and beautiful song.
it's great.
Um, Off the top of my head, oh,
Let's give us one more. Let's
maybe
give it.
New Morning by Bob Dylan. I love the concept of every day is a new day, you know. So I think New Morning. Yeah, those are some.
There
That's
you
a
go.
good point.
There you go. Jim Knight, what an honor and a treat, man. We really appreciate your insights. I mean, your impact that you've made to this profession that makes all professions possible is exceedingly applaudable. And what I love about your work is your advocacy for coaches. That impact ends up supporting every kid in a school. So that is just tremendous. So I'm just honored to learn from you, my friend.
Jim, go ahead.
Not just every kid that teacher teaches.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
So the impact of a coach is a lifetime. It's not just this year. And that's part of the problem with evaluating coaching just based on this.
Mm,
It's not just this year, it's every year. So
even better.
so I think the power of a coach is pretty awesome.
It's hard to